Hello and welcome to Critical Hit. I'm Matthew.
I'm David.
I'm Kyle.
And tonight we're talking about Scream to end our horror movie marathon. So Scream, it's a pretty good movie. It's from late 80s, early 90s?
Early 90s.
It feels really 90s anyways.
How could it be from the 80s?
Okay. So obviously 90s horror movie where the main character Sydney is basically being chased around by a guy with a knife, a slasher. And I mean, we could go more into the plot, but honestly, the movie's a huge commentary on horror movies. So all the characters just constantly talk about the horror movies they watch and all the scenes that they're reminded of, and the movie itself commentates on that. Suffice to say, if you haven't seen Scream by now, you probably don't watch horror movies. And if you do watch horror movies and you haven't seen Scream, you should go see Scream because it's really good.
Why are you listening to us instead of watching
this movie?
Horror movies.
So it's really good, but it's not a movie you really watch for the plot. Not that it has a bad one, but it's just it's not the point. I've seen this movie a couple of times, so I was really excited to see it again because it's a really fun movie. I saw this when I was younger, when I really didn't have a good time watching horror movies and understand the appeal. And this actually was one of my gateways into horror as a genre. It opened up the idea
that is wild, man. That is a wild entry.
It was kind of the same way for me too.
Yeah. So how many you've seen this a ton of times too? Huh?
Yeah, I first saw that I think when I was younger. I think around middle school.
Yeah.
I think the freshest. It wasn't just the fact that they were talking about horror movies, but the fact that they were with the meta element just in general is what fascinated me.
Yeah, the meta is so
even though I wasn't a huge horror movie fan, the fact that it was examining itself, that was really unique.
Yeah, and genre savvy characters are always one of my favorites.
Well, there's not a lot of genres that you can do that with.
No,
when you think about it, and not broad genres like that. That would be hard to do with comedy.
Yeah.
That would be very difficult.
I mean, I've seen it before. I think of Guardians of the Galaxy is a good example of kind of being very genre savvy of sci-fi. Certain romance movies, 500 Days of Summer, for example, really good self-aware commentaries on romance. But Scream, I haven't...
Well, nothing reaches this caliber, though. This is constant.
Well, I think a big part of it is the reason why it's so much easier to do with horror is because horror is so formulaic.
That's true.
It is.
You know.
But did we know that before Scream came out? Because, the Scream was the first one to really bring it up.
I think hardcore movie fans knew it.
Yeah.
But the general populace didn't.
Yeah. So, Kyle, this is your first time seeing it, right?
This was my first time seeing this, which is great because, well, apparently this was the movie that got you into horror.
Yeah, I would say so.
I find interesting and I want to talk about. This is one I've seen many horror movies before this, and I'm only now seeing this, and so it's fantastic to see all those things I've been going and noticing in other movies up until now commented on in this way, or spoofed or mocked and just kind of played with, and it's fantastic. Actually, something I just thought this up. If this kind of worked as your guys' gateway. Mm-hmm. It served as that means of desensitizing you.
Yeah, because
that helped you.
Yeah.
It was almost your baptism into horror movies here by introducing you to all of them in that way. This is a movie that is played with every one of the tropes of horror movies in order to become this quintessential, archetypical horror movie. Well, and through that, you can really appreciate the genre as a whole.
Yeah, I haven't seen very many movies like it. I think of Cabin in the Woods is the only one I could really compare it to, where you have a movie which of course is based on sort of this formula. Oh yeah, where it's the movie itself is making comments about how you're being distant from the experience of the characters, while it also is being encouraging you to be distant in a really weird way. Mm-hmm. So Scream, a lot of times you'll hear the characters talk about oh my gosh, it's this horror movie, or the famous scene where the guy's sitting on the couch and the murderer is right behind him, and he's watching a horror movie and he's just saying, look behind you. That iconic scene's you laugh at it even though you think he's totally going to die in that scene. Mm-hmm. So it's
I love that. Oh my gosh, the fact that this came out after Clerks, which is a movie of people sitting around and talking about movie themes, and then you have one of the characters in that is Randall, who works in the video store. This is Randy, who works in the video store. They have the Clerks DVD right there as he's watching that scene that you're talking about.
I think in the 90s was really sort of the age of the film geek.
Yeah,
because I mean, that was shortly after VHS was invented. It was at that point that a lot of people they could just sit down and really just analyze the hell out of movies in a way that they couldn't before, and so that's why we end up getting movies like Clerks and like this.
Oh, and it works so well really good in this movie too, because you have I mean, I love that scene where the same guy, Randy, gives, like, the lecture of, like, the ways to survive a horror movie.
Yeah.
And it's really funny because all the things he's saying are happening off screen. So, like, he's like, you don't have sex or you'll die. And two of the characters are totally having sex while he says that.
Yes.
And it goes on from there where the movie is just...
Well, during that scene, he's talking to a group of people who were sitting around watching
a horror movie.
Yeah. And we're on the exact opposite side of that screen looking in on him. And
yeah.
he's in the middle between the people he's talking to and us watching him.
While they're in a horror movie themselves.
Yes.
So it's so interesting because the horror movie, the screen becomes one of the audience members of its own movie. Yeah. Right? Like, it's sitting there on the couch next to us eating its popcorn and saying, oh my gosh, look how dumb they're being right now.
Well, this is
a movie, cops already.
As I'm watching it, the whole feeling I'm getting is this is a movie that's winking at me the entire time.
Mm-hmm.
It knows exactly what it's doing, and because of that, there's just this undertone of, okay, you guys see what's going on here, look at this. And it just kind of allows you to I don't know, man.
You gotta finish your sentences. Dude.
I can't finish my sentence. I don't even know how to express it. You're familiar. You're desensitized. You're able to embrace this movie on a completely different level than a standard movie where you have to follow the plot. It's giving you. Oh my god!
It's so self-aware.
Well, and
it's amazing.
You think about the villain. You think about the villain slasher movies and how unstoppable they are. Think about Freddy. Mm-hmm. Think about Jason. Think about Michael, and just how that works out for them throughout the bulk of the movie. But this, oh my gosh! Well, with the Ghostface guy, he is constantly
gets kicked in the
tripping
crotch
over
so
stuff.
many times.
He is constantly being kicked in the crotch by female characters, which is fantastic for the genre and a reversal of that victim.
Yeah, well, it's so nice to see the female characters are kicking ass in this movie.
Well, yeah, because it's a genre built on the victimization of women.
Yeah.
And it's really, really interesting that in the deconstruction of that, the woman is able to actually fight back, and that's really...
Well, it's
good
great
and empowering.
You brought that up.
And it just makes the sort of the Ghostface killer just feel that much more real too.
Yeah, and in a weird
watching
way,
someone
there's
fight back
something
makes it more like
there's something even freakier about the fact that even as you're fighting, it keeps going. That also felt very true to life. It's not I hit him once, he's down.
Yeah,
which is often when you see a movie, you hit someone, they're down, they're not getting back up. Good or bad.
But I do want to say, like, it's one of the very few horror movies that I can recall immediately that the female characters are the ones who are taking charge and, like, doing something significant while in this horrible situation. Like, Alien are those you can really think of.
But also, the nerd lived.
That and also...
The women and the nerd.
To go back to what you said with the females, sort of taking control. Who's the one primary male authority figure in this movie? It's Dewey, who, it's deliberately pointed out that he's just sort of like a wimp that nobody actually respects.
Oh, there's an impotence about it.
Yeah, so like there's so much commentary on like gender stereotypes in horror, like how horror villains behave. But my question is, coming to this movie, we are dealing with like our horror movie marathon. Is this still a horror movie if it's doing so much meta commentary on itself?
I would say so, because...
I know when I first saw it, I was genuinely scared when I saw it.
I
did actually.
I remember that too.
I do like it as not just a deconstruction, but also as a movie.
But does it balance its comedy and its horror enough? Like, is it just horror enough to be horror, or is it we just calling it horror while we really laugh at it?
I think that is a serious question. I know that for me, I had a big smile on my face while I was watching a lot of this movie.
Yeah.
But there were moments where I got chills at how well it executed something.
Oh, yeah.
Like that scene where she's in the bathroom and the other girls who were talking trash about her just left.
Oh, yes.
And you
the high
see,
school.
There was obviously then someone standing on one of the toilets in the stalls, and you can see underneath the boots coming down and stomping down like that. And then very silently, you see the costume.
Putting on the mask,
the shroud,
the costume coming down,
coming down just over the boots like that. And I just got chills all over as I'm seeing this. I'm like, oh my gosh, even at the school? This is happening here? It's broad daylight.
Yeah.
I think that there were moments, especially because they broke the genre, and they broke some of those rules, and it was able to do things that I was not, as a viewer, expecting. I actually did have those moments of eagerness, of anticipation, of fear, or just kind of being on the edge of my seat, wanting to know what's going on.
Well, with the main, like for example, like having given the rules of how to survive a horror movie, you kind of trust that that's going to be the case with this movie. So, like, when the main character loses her virginity, you're thinking, oh crap, she's gonna die, or she could die, and so it heightens your anxiety for her in those final scenes, while she still keeps her head on her shoulders and really does an amazing job against the villain. It's a weird, because like half the movie feels like it's more comedy, but I do want to say that for me, I love the opening to this movie really, like, for me, encapsulates the entire movie. There's
gosh,
so the opening scene with what's her name,
Drew Barrymore.
That's Drew Barrymore. Man.
Like, holy crap! It's a long scene. It's like 10 minutes or so, maybe 15, and it's one of my favorite openings to a movie, hands down, because you have this layout where the characters are talking on the phone back and forward, and she and the stranger on the phone are just giving commentary about horror movies and like their favorite horror movies, and like
flirting
and like their stupid things people do in horror movies and stuff like that. And then there's just this one point where the movie turns, where like the conversation in the phone turns, and it becomes a horror movie.
Yes,
and it's incredibly powerful because like the guy says something along the lines of like, well, I can see you standing in the kitchen right now. And then, like, suddenly, like, the music changes, the tone changes.
I want to know who I'm looking at.
Yeah, that's it. It's just that really interesting moment where you kind of realize, okay, so this movie's going to be, throughout the movie, you're going to have that idea of, okay, we're going to be commenting the entire time about how goofy this thing is. Or how ridiculous horror movies, slasher movies are. But at the same time, this is really happening to these people.
Yes.
So it's this really powerful scene, and it's an amazing opening.
It's a brilliant opening, and on its own it could stand almost as a little short piece.
Yeah.
But the way the rest of that movie interacts with it, it's a lot like Psycho.
Yeah.
Because it starts out with a character who you really think is going to be the main character, Drew Barrymore, kind of a big figure.
Well,
could have been.
And when they were doing promotion for the movie, they actually treated it as if she was the main character.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh,
that's
that's
amazing.
fantastic. Yeah.
That's why she's on the front of the
She is,
of the
she
DVD
is.
and everything.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
It's
That's
fantastic. I was going, okay, what's going on with Drew here? And I didn't expect for the kill off to happen so very early.
Yeah, and I remember that like that element of uncertainty was what really grabbed me when I first saw it.
And that was fascinating, and it kept it. We're making fun of this in a way. We're having fun, but it can still happen, and it might be a little bit different because that is a very different scene using the phones like that.
Oh yeah, it was great. Or even her surviving the first stab.
But
is
look
like,
at how the rest of that movie uses that. Sydney's first encounter with the killer, the whole time you are thinking back to that scene with Drew's character.
Yeah.
And you're thinking about what Drew did and how she responded, and you're going, "Oh, Cindy, you shouldn't do that."
Yeah.
Because we know now, and it's kind of a microcosm for how if you know the horror genre and you're watching a horror movie, you know, don't go in there.
Don't answer the phone.
He's behind the door.
Yeah.
Look behind you. All of these tropes.
And it's so interesting to have a movie that is just commenting about tropes so much, but is still like one of the classic horror movies. Like when I think of classic horror movies, I do think of Scream.
Well, that's
like it's on my list. Like
that's what it's doing though. It's gathered all of these bits and pieces of what we know to be horror, and it's synthesized them together, stitched them all together, so it could become the quintessential horror movie.
Well, and that's what it ended up doing. I think it really kind of ended up killing the slasher movie. Killing, but it ended up sort of ending the slasher movie.
Which is
craze.
beautifully ironic, by the way. The slaughter of the slasher film there.
Yeah.
So you think like put the nail in the coffin for these movies?
I think so. I mean, think about all the major horror movies that came after Scream. I'm thinking things like The Ring. So like you have them more like the Japanese remakes, or things like Blair Witch Project.
Yeah,
Blair Witch Project. Actually, you can really
Paranormal
see
Activity.
where Blair Witch came from, especially after what you said about that being the age of video and VHS.
Yeah, but my point is, it's like, but after this, there's just like, what do you do with the genre?
So is that the danger then of doing meta comment, like being
well, that's
like
the danger
self-aware?
of deconstructing something.
Yeah.
Once you've taken it apart, it's kind of hard to
put it back together,
to take it serious. It is hard to put it back together.
And then that's one of the reasons why I think the sequels weren't as successful either. When you have that meta element, there's a level of disconnect that happens with the story. It's kind of inevitable.
But deconstruction actually can be a danger to a genre.
Yeah.
When we look at this, the slasher film, it's kind of coming back in some ways, but the way it was coming back recently was with the reboot remake style things that were almost trying to reconstruct what happened before with the new Nightmare on Elm Street, with the Scream 4.
Here's the thing: almost all of the major slasher remakes, though, everyone hated them.
Yeah.
And
look at what it can do to other mediums and other genres. Look at the comic book medium. What happened in the 1980s with
Watchmen,
with Watchmen,
with
Dark Knight, with Dark Knight Returns, and these sort of things that darkened that world. And then you get the 90s, which turned into this gore fest of characters and these homicidal figures, and it just became darker and darker and darker till now. It's kind of hard. Comics have been forever touched by that. and there gets to be a reconstruction at this point that we're trying for. But it's always going to have these things in the background.
You're saying the same thing's happening with Scream?
I think it's different because Scream didn't darken, it lightened.
Yeah, it makes it humorous, which is interesting because, like, introducing humor in general into the concept of horror is a really, like, for me, a disturbing concept. Like, there are scenes you watch Scream where you laugh. There's a scene where she's like, well, I'm going to run out the front door, not up the stairs. I'm not an idiot. But then when the guy comes at her, she's locked the front door, so she runs up the stairs. And I laughed because I'm like, oh, it's funny because, like, it's going into the exact thing she just said 5 minutes ago. Yeah. But at the same time, there's a guy chasing her with a knife. Like,
right, it's laughing even though you shouldn't.
But that's the thing, is like when you combine these two concepts of like horror and comedic, should we? Like, is that okay to do? Because it's really weird. Like, should I laugh at those scenes? Is that okay?
I think that you can. I think that you should. It helps you understand the genre better. It created that beautiful piece of work that we just watched.
Yeah, but it also creates a distance between you and the characters. Right? Like,
because I think there's a way in which we relate to them very closely.
And at the same time, I think with a movie like this, that's actually kind of okay.
Yeah.
I think that there's a limit to how much you're really supposed to connect with these characters.
But at the same time, you really can, because as they're giving the commentary, you're watching them go through the motions.
Mm-hmm.
And at that point, you can relate to them. You can really relate to Randy as he's talking to the people about what you shouldn't do in the horror movie. There are just these figures that you can connect with in that way. And I think that is the movie recognizing the potential danger of deconstruction and trying to counterbalance it.
Yeah, but I do agree with what Dave said earlier, that I think this movie was the end of slasher movies being, like, because, like, nowadays, like, a lot of the horror movies coming out are very, like, spiritual based, like, what's the latest one, Ouija, or demons come possess you, or stuff like that, or poltergeist.
But also, you still have the gory element of the horror, but it turned into the torture porn genre.
Yeah, like,
Saw. And you guys are forgetting zombie.
Yeah, zombies
are the biggest thing going on right now.
It's really interesting because, like, this movie is not, like, it's a huge deconstruction of horror as a genre, but it also is, like, I would say, like, the end of one part of the genre. And that's really interesting because, like, I don't know is it because of the meta-ness in it that we've ended a type of storytelling that we're not satisfied with anymore. That we want the other ones now.
I'm curious. I'm curious if there isn't going to be something classic about this that is going to bring us back to it. Mm-hmm. Or if we're going to come back to it in a different way.
Well, I mean, they made a Scream 4, I think, kind of hoping they could do what we're talking about. And people liked it. It wasn't a phenomenon the way the first one was, though.
No.
It was a movie that made money. It wasn't a movie that changed anything.
No. There seems to be a very fine line between doing a deconstruction like that and then doing the scary movies where they're entirely spoof.
Yeah, I think that was kind of the inevitable result of what we saw first here.
Yeah. So yeah, for me, like, I would just say, like, this movie's really good. It's a fantastic watch, and even if you don't like horror movies, this is actually a really good horror movie to watch because it prepares you for the horror. But I will say it's also interesting because as a storyteller, it gives you that warning of if you really wanted, like, to deconstruct something, be careful because you could be permanently changing an entire medium of storytelling if you do it well enough, like Scream did.
Yeah. So deconstruction is dangerous, but sometimes worth it.
Yeah. So for me, like, I would say it's absolutely worth seeing.
I think it was worth it here. I mean, I don't think we lost a whole lot by not having
slasher movies anymore. That's fair.
But by not having Friday the 18th, I don't know,
80,000. But anyways, so I enjoyed it a lot too. I really, like I said, I saw this movie when I was a kid, so I mean, I wasn't that scared this time because I knew exactly everything that happened, but I remember that this was actually a movie that I remember deliberately going out of my way to watch it several times over and over because I enjoyed it so much.
Yeah, and it stands up to time, too. If you watch it, like, even though it's, like, early 90s, like, it's still really fun to watch later on, and the datedness of it actually makes it kind of even more of a treasure, because, like, you're like, oh, like, look how all the cute 90s references it's making.
Look at how 90s they are.
Yeah, exactly.
But, I don't know, as the first-time viewer, I think the thing that was most fun for me was seeing how much they played for it in the music they used, in the shots that they did, how they were treating these older movies, and how they were referencing them piece by piece by piece. And that was kind of the fun for me, was being able to see all of these things just constantly being, look, we know what we're talking about, and we're having fun with it. That was, for me, probably the biggest draw for this movie.
All right, guys, thanks for listening in. I really hope you guys enjoyed our month of horror. We'd probably be down to do this next year, too.
Totally.
Like, if there's movies that people would like to hear us look into for horror month, like, that'd be awesome. For now, this is going to be it. So thank you for listening. Take care, guys.
See ya.
Laters.